This is why they refer to the bishops as the snipers. Get ready for some deadly target practice from afar by the one and only Magnus Carlsen. This is a masterpiece. We can all learn something from this positional beauty. His opponent is a strong player, a 2500 international master. Wouldn't be surprised if this guy is on his way to GM, the way he plays. His name is Bojan Maksimovic. Maksimovic. He is with the white pieces here, and after e4, Magnus goes a6. The St. George defence, it's known as in chess.com, also known as the English defence, and I'll show you a quick game here. This is Anatoly Karpov versus Tony Miles, 1980, the most famous example of this move, a6 on move 1. And look at move 40 here. Tony Miles with the bishops. Anatoly Karpov went down. He was the reigning world champion. He got taken down with 1a6. He was unimpressed, right? Now flicking back to this Magnus game, watch how Magnus uses the bishops, the snipers. We get this French defense structure now. So even though Magnus started with a6, suddenly doesn't look so silly. Knight bd2, this Tarrasch setup, and c5. Decent move when the knight is not on c3, otherwise not so good. We talked about that yesterday in the Frank Marshall Immortal game that I covered. Do check that one out if you've never seen it. It's incredible. So here, white takes on c5. The bishop recaptures, bishop d3, knight c6, some standard developing moves, and knight f6. Dares this pawn to kick on. Where's the knight going? Well, g4, not the passive d7. And here you can target this pawn and it's not so easy to defend. You know, there's no rook e1 or the bishop crashes through here, supported by the knight. So you have to go knight b3, hit this one, kick it back, then go bishop f4, but then there's f6. And it goes on and black's doing okay. So instead of doing this, white goes queen e2, queen c7, and now takes on d5. Magnus recaptures, knight e4, good move, hits the bishop, it retreats. Anytime a bishop sits 2 squares from a knight, it controls it nicely. Magnus's position solid, but white's piece is flowing out, and now I looked here for some way to save the bishop pair for white, but it's really hard to do. You know, knight f4 is a threat, supported by the queen. And if you go g3 to cover that square, well, you can hop in the other direction and you're picking this bishop up. This is a sample line. So you can't hold on to the bishops. c4 was apparently more energetic for white, but knight g3 played. Magnus goes bishop d7, no need to rush with this, but now after c3, the bishop could be squirming back. So knight f4. White takes here, queen captures, Magnus has picked up the bishops. The rooks come to the d-file, Magnus holding off castling, but now he does it. There isn't an attack there that's going to break through for white, even though they've got a lot of pieces pointing in that direction. Queen c2 probes, but g6, blunts the diagonal. h4, good play, running the pawn down, using tactics. If you take, there's rook e4, skewering these pieces, you're going to win a piece or the queen. So we see king g7 from Magnus, h5, and now I love this move, one of the most grandmasterly moves you can get. Bishop to c8. I love when the rook from the a8 or a1 square has come to the center, and then the bishop tucks back to c1 or c8, opens the eyes of the rook, underdevelops, but activates this piece in the process. Bishop e4, good move, targeting the knight. And now Magnus starts exchanging pieces. You know, even though he's arguably simplifying the game, good move by white here, hits the queen, this comes off with check. Well, when the dust settles, these bishops are such a nasty long-term asset for black as the board opens up. Queen b3, probes against b7, queen c7 covers, g3, it's great chess from white. You know, the position's just almost completely level. We see rook d8, more piece exchanges, bishop takes, this pawn takes here, knight f4, b6, queen d1, and now Magnus even offers this queen exchange. He still loves his prospects in this endgame. White goes queen e2, decent move. Queen d6 played and knight d3. White manoeuvring really nicely. Bishop c7, knight b4, a5, knight c2, bishop d7, knight e3. And this is maybe the one small criticism we can make. White never gets the 3-on-2 majority here, rumbling against the two pawns. Excuse me. And because of that, now after a3, Magnus goes a4, sets up this bind, controlling 3 pawns with 2 pawns, taking good space. Got me wondering, what if you did b3, try and stop this kind of idea, maybe expand yourself with c4 soon. Well, then there's queen e5, you probe here, and there is no knockout blow, just probe is the way it keeps going. But what we see is a3, a4, king g2, and now f5. And here is the problem for white. Magnus is rumbling his own 3-on-2, and he's got lots of juicy targets now to start running into. So queen c2 played. Now we get bishop b6. White comes back with the queen, kind of thrashing. It's not easy to know what to do. If you ever push c4, well, b4 is a nice pawn structure transposition. So e5 from Magnus, the bishop's about to get squashed. So we see bishop a8 played and e4 anyway. It's looking a bit offside, stuck in that corner, the bishop. Now we get knight d5, trying to pick up that bishop. It saves itself. Knight b4, bishop c5. Now bishop b7, Magnus building up time on the clock. All of this time, king h6 played, and it's a nice idea. Covers this square, and after bishop a8, we get bishop e8 here, preparing g5 and bishop round to here. Nasty threats. So finally white says, you know what, I've got to try and break out, and c4 comes on the board. But queen d4 from Magnus, he's gained a square, the weakness of the last move. He's hitting this pawn. So bishop d5 now played to cover here. There could have been a threat to take there, but this is not the best move, as you can see. The computer wanted knight a6, hitting the bishop. After it retreats, c5. And the whole idea is you just chuck a pawn to desperately get rid of one of the bishops. Still black is better, of course, with the space, the pressure, the extra pawn now. But instead we see bishop d5 to add some cover here. Now g5 from Magnus. He's rumbling those pawns. Knight c6. Hits this queen. Again, you desperately want to get rid of one of those snipers. Magnus having none of it. He plays queen d3 and it forces an exchange. You can't allow the queen to start checking from f3, pressure here and everything like that. So the queen chops, the pawn recaptures, and king f1 coming around to stop this pawn. Now Magnus takes here, and you can't recapture or your knight on c6 drops. So what do we see instead? Knight e5 pressures this pawn, and now Magnus with the full board awareness, he throws d2, the king runs in, and now he takes on f2, trying to distract that white king away to then promote the pawn. Of course you can't do that. This pawn's about to drop if you take this pawn. So now we see g4. Great idea from white, trying to disrupt Magnus's pawns. But he flicks in bishop d4. I mean, his control of the position, it's just masterful. He encourages the knight to take here, but he's brought the bishop onto this diagonal, pressuring this one, and now when he takes on g4, he's also influencing in this direction, preparing to run the pawn. The king takes this one, g3, king d3, hits that monster of a bishop, but another fantastic move from Magnus. Does he move it? Does he retreat? Anything like that? No, he goes bishop to f7, because if the king takes here, then this bishop takes here, the pawn's running through. If knight e3, you still go, and yes, white can take and bishop recaptures, but this is a lost endgame. So coming back here, we didn't see the king take. We saw bishop g2 coming in front of the passed pawn, and now you want to be taking on b2, removing this defender. If you do it too soon like this, then white can take here. Yes, you win, but king comes over, you're going to win this pawn. Not so good. So what we see instead is bishop f6, and look at these pieces. Whoops, got something coming up on my screen. Look at these snipers blasting down the board from afar. Just beautiful to see. This was the thumbnail position. What a picture of harmony. So knight b6 was played, coming after this pawn here, and now we see bishop b3. It covers the attack. King e3 played, coming over to pick up this pawn here, you couldn't make any inroads here. The bishops cover the squares. Now bishop takes on b2. Bishop c6, trying to win the a4 pawn, but g2 distracts this bishop right back, because if you go king f2, there's bishop d4, check, and you pick up the knight. Completely hopeless. So bishop takes on a3, king d3, bishop b2. I mean, I love this. Look at the barrier that those bishops form. The pawn's about to run. What to do? You have to give up the knight as the best move. We see bishop d5 instead, but Magnus simply takes. The knight recaptures a3, and white throws in the towel. The problem is you're getting trousered, as Daniel Naroditsky would say, a phrase which comes from Russian, where you've got the two trouser legs on each side, right? Waistbands at the top of the board on Magnus's side, and they're running down towards the ankle, these pawns, and between your remaining king and pieces, you've not got enough forces to stop both pawns. So just a sample line here, after a3, if you march the king in to come with this pawn, send the knight the other way, then this is an example of how the line could go. The king comes around, the knight does then jump, and here's the trick. You don't then push, but instead you can just hold with the king, and now bishop f6. You force the knight to move, obviously it goes, and then the pawn runs through, doesn't it? That's game over. So this was the final position, a real masterclass from the world number one. I hope you enjoyed that one. Do hit subscribe, smash that like button, really helps me out. And if you want to see another epic game of chess, check out the video on screen, and I hope to see you again soon.